Julie Thomas has been the archivist at Sac State here, as well as the curator of the university's library's internationally recognized Japanese American Archival Collection since 2003. Now, I just found out that she's going to retire in June 1st, so we're lucky to get her in here. So, she received a master's in arts and history and master of information sciences from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 95. And before her life in California, she was archivist at Sacramento History, excuse me, Chicago History Museum, and archivist at the Motorola Corporate Archives. Okay, so I first, all right, that's a script. So now I first met Julie at ACC, formerly known as Asian Community Center. She gave this presentation. It was really good. After the presentation, I got her card. It said Sac State Library. I said, have you ever done anything with Renaissance? No. So 2 years later, here she is. So you have hopes and dreams, don't give up. And also, so to show her level of importance in this area of history, there was a recent, was it Time of Remembrance event at the California Museum. She was in the audience, and the host of that program recognized her, called her out. So, that I was in the back row. She didn't see me. So, but that impressed me. So, I think that's it. So without, turn it over to Julie. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Joel. Okay, well, Janet's setting that up. I'm Julie Thomas. Thanks for inviting me. And I do want to let you know what an honor it is for me to speak with you. I was actually the archivist that arranged and described the Renaissance Society's archives when it was donated about 12 years ago. And as I was looking through all of the speaker series and lectures and forums, I was blown away. I was like, I can't wait till I retire so I can join this group. It's amazing. And thank you again. And I also, it's called, my presentation is when, the incarceration of Japanese Americans and when democracy failed and how to protect it for all. And I was telling Janet and Deanna that last night I was just thinking, everything is going on right now, similar. So I invite you that as I'm going through this, if you can think of something that's happening today that is a mirror image of what was going on then, I invite you to share that as well. And just a little one little caveat as well before I start is one of the first things that made me decide to become a historian was I had a professor who said, why do we study history? Why do we study history? So it'll never happen again. It always happens again. It's happening again now. He said, why we study history is so that you don't believe everything you see, you don't believe everything you hear, and you don't believe everything you read. And I was like, what's the connection? As historians and as an archivist, we use critical thinking. We look deeper behind what is going on so that I can make and you can make informed decisions. So as I'm going through this presentation, you can just see some of what I'm talking about. You have to kind of look behind the words and the pictures to really see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in and the down button. And I was very aggressive there. Very quickly, I want to go over the Japanese American Archival Collection for those of you who aren't aware of it. It started in 1995 with the donation from Mary Tsukamoto. It was her educational material. And since then, it's become arguably one of the best in the world. It's not arguable. It is. And why is that? it's not that it's necessarily the biggest out there. What makes this just spectacular is that everything is arranged, described, and available. Anybody can find anything of the tens of thousands stuff we have in this collection. So that's important, and the depth and breadth of it. You know, history isn't just one point of view. So we have those who are incarcerated, the government who incarcerated them, the neighbors who helped them, the haters. You know, so you can see all aspects of what happened and put it together and get the full story. So I'm proud of it as well. And I don't know if she is going to thank me for doing this, but I do want to point out Sarah Allison. She's the head of the Department of Special Collections and University Archives. And she doesn't have 23 years experience, but for a couple years now, we've been working together on a succession plan. So Sarah is a good go-to person if you want to see anything in the archives. And again, I've spent 8 years digitizing everything through 4 grants. So everything in the collection, textual material, pamphlets, some photos are part of the CSU, Japanese American Digitization Project. We can't, and I would not even want to compete with Densho. And if you don't know what Densho is, go ahead and just look it up. It is the premier place for online information about the incarceration. Oh, okay. So anything you want to know? Am I doing something here? Okay, that's all right. Okay, so I invite you to just put in Japanese American Archival Collection on your computer. This will be the first thing that comes up. Okay? So I'm going to start with the background and talk a little bit about the actual anti-Asian legislation. This is just 3, there's dozens of them. These, though, just kind of stand out as my point of view. And that the first one is the Naturalization Act of 1870, where it said only white immigrants could become U.S. citizens. And what they did was they used this wording going forward. So, for example, in Executive Order 9066 that President Roosevelt signed that led to the evacuation of 120,000 Japanese Americans from the West Coast, they never said the word Japanese. They said anybody who's not a citizen. Well, guess who wasn't a citizen? Japanese. And their children, they were just as dangerous too, right? Even though they were 70% were American citizens, 50% were children. Danger to society, right? This one, the Expatriation Act of 1907, U.S. women lost their citizenship until their husband was naturalized. Who couldn't be naturalized? Japanese. Yeah, they couldn't become naturalized. So if I married somebody from Japan, the first generation were called Issei, I would lose my citizenship. So what does that mean? I'm a woman without a state. Nobody will claim me. I don't have a passport. So that was crazy. And then the Immigration Act of 1924. And again, it was the first time they limited the number of immigrants, and they just said flat out, nobody from Asia. Because again, they're ineligible to become a citizen. So why have them come on in? Playing with words the whole time. So lots and lots of anti-Asian legislation, as we're seeing today, right? Just people with a different ethnicity, different skin color, different, language. of origin. So I've only got 45 minutes, so I'm going to go through this. One of the other laws specific to California was the Alien Land Law of 1913, and it prohibited aliens ineligible for citizenship, never use the word Asian, from owning land or possessing long-term leases. And so I'm going to come over here. This is a legal document for granting guardianship of, this is actually a Tsukamoto family too. Guardianship of these children. They were landowners. So they were the landowners. And then I believe it was Kuzo. Kuzo, as the father, he claimed guardianship because they were American citizens. One of my dearest friends, Reiko Nagumo, she tells the story of how her brother in kindergarten went in and said, yeah, here's my checkbook. He was a landowner, right? Because you can't legislate guardianship of U.S. children. Anybody think of a similarity today? So hopefully the Supreme Court will not rule that, citizenship, birthright citizenship. Hopefully they'll say, yes, it is still legal. But I don't know if you're aware that in Florida, for the past year, if you're a Chinese national, you cannot own property. You cannot own property unless you're a naturalized citizen or have a green card. So there it's starting again. They're a country of concern. That is the justification. Another thing that California did, they allowed for segregated schools. They left it up to the school district for them to decide whether they wanted to create, segregated schools. This is the quote. The governing body of a school district shall have power to exclude children of filthy or vicious habits. Children suffering from contagious or infectious diseases. And you can establish separate schools for Indians, children of Chinese, Japanese, or Mongolian parentage. And I should actually put these in parentheses because it doesn't say Mongolian. It says another word that I find very offensive. So I changed Mongolian. And Florin chose to have segregated schools. This is a 1931 photo of graduation. This is a grammar school from Florin, Walnut Grove, Ileton, and Cortland. So these are segregated schools. And I always like to point out the one person who's a Caucasian. Who do you think that was? Teacher, right. And do you think she was talking about any history besides U.S. history? In our collection, I have the reading list that the government said that the children in the camps had to read. One of them, Why Democracy is Great. The United States and Democracy, the Legacy. I'm like, did they see not only the irony, the cruelty of that? So that was what was going on back. This was 31. We have photos of other schools as well, from different time periods. I just like this one. Okay. There we go. Did I skip one? No. Okay. I am going to now just jump ahead and talk about after Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th, the FBI started rounding up the leaders of the Japanese American community. December 8th. it came out that they used the U.S. Census records. They had been planning this, they, being the government, had been planning this going back to the mid to late 30s. So it was illegal to use census information, but what the heck? Let's go ahead and use it. And they immediately knew who to round up. And by rounding up, when I say they knew who, leaders of the community, meaning Buddhist priests, newspaper writers, editors, fishermen. Fishermen could be sending signals to the Imperial Navy, Japanese Imperial Navy, and some of them were taken away and families didn't see them for years. We have a photo from Santa Fe Detention Center, and I want to make sure I stay on time. There was a difference. The Department of Justice camps, which were for enemy aliens, they were considered prisoners of war. What was going on with the evacuation into these concentration camps, it was the War Relocation Authority. They were making it up. Department of Justice camps, they were ruled by the Geneva Convention. It was very clear, assuming they did, how they were supposed to be treated. War Relocation Authority, they were making it up as it went along. So this man, for example, might have been identified as an enemy alien, put in a Department of Justice camp, and I have a picture from late 1943 that the Santa Fe Department of Justice camp sent to the family members. They had no idea for 2 years almost where their husband was, their father was, their brother was. Were they alive? So that's that crazy thing. And can anybody think today of things that are being used? ICE is using them. The IRS, they're getting records from the IRS. Social Security, is that legal? I don't think so. It's a good thing I'm a privacy freak. So my information is very limited, but most people, even I had to have the IRS. I like this for a number of reasons. So this was a general information bulletin from one of the concentration camps, Heart Mountain, up in Wyoming, dated September 19th. Most of the evacuees got to the camps around June, July, August. They started going into the camps, but they started hearing about what was going on in Germany. And they said they were always called concentration camps, right? But they started hearing what was going on in Germany, and they said, we can't call them concentration camps anymore. Even though Germany was using euphemism, those were death camps. They weren't concentration camps. So the government said, let's start to rewrite a little bit of history for what we're going to call these people. This is my favorite. They were colonists. And they were in colonies, right? They were relocation camps. I lived in a relocation camp. It was called when I moved here from Chicago in my apartment. That was my relocation center, right? There's all internment camps. They were concentration camps. And I especially love this. If you read this, I'm not going to read it all to you, is what was happening is that they were saying the incarcerees is, we want rice. We want rice. And I have a menu from early 44. And the menu, it's meant for the cooks who were ordering the food. And I did the math. It equated to 2 ounces of rice for lunch. Well, they called it supper and then dinner. That's a shot glass. I'm Irish. If you take my potatoes away from me, life has no meaning, right? They live on rice. But they're saying, hey, man, we're all suffering. So don't complain to us. Okay? The colonists. This one is especially, I think, um, it's just awful. It's unbelievable. So this is from Heart Mountain, and Heart Mountain, as the other camps, they had what was called block managers. So a block could consist of about 10 large barracks, each with 10, uh, like 10 feet, rooms in it. So this is a chairman's meeting from February 15th, 43. And the chairman were asking the head of the administration. He was heading up that camp on behalf of the War Relocation Authority, and they were asking about the loyalty questionnaire. Is anybody familiar with the loyalty questionnaire? Okay. What in 43, all of the incarcerees were asked to fill out a form. It was called like a statement of, let me see, it was called like just something innocuous, a statement of citizenship or something like that. So they wanted everybody's name, address, background. Question 27 and 28, the last two questions, changed the lives of so many people. Question 27, will you fight for America? Anywhere, anytime. We ask you to. Well, some people said no. You know, I'm going to go and die for the country while my family is in a concentration camp. And number 28, will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and forswear any allegiance or obedience to the Japanese emperor or any other foreign government, power, organization? Why would people be hesitant to answer yes to that?
Any nationality.
Exactly. They're stateless. That's exactly right. They're stateless. And what about the second generation, the Nisei, the Japanese Americans? Why would they answer? Why wouldn't they answer yes? They never had allegiance to the emperor. They're American citizens. So the chairman were saying, we have a problem with that. And the answer was, hey, as a matter of fact, it's been done away with. We're not going to ask that question. We're going to replace it with, will you swear to abide by the laws of the United States and take no action which would interfere in the war effort? That was the answer they got. Then another one is, when do you expect to start registration? February 16th. What's the date? The 15th, the day before. And did your people, the question, did young people ask you for a postponement? And what Mr. Robertson said was, yeah, I postponed it. But instructions from DC, Washington, is that we have to finish it by February 23rd. So if we don't start registration very soon, there will be strong pressure from Washington. So yeah, I postponed it. But wait, I didn't really. That's in writing. And then the last one, will there be any punishment for those who refuse to register? Answer, nope, no specific punishment. Those who answered no, they were called no-no boys. They were sent to a segregation camp in Tule Lake, and they were considered now enemy aliens, and they were all queued up to be repatriated. Even if they were Americans. If you were, under 18, you went with your parents regardless. And so he's giving bad information, because then when the moment came, the next day, they didn't have a chance to discuss it with their family. What do I do? If I say yes to question 27, I'm going to be drafted for the war. If I answer yes to question 28, I'm a person without a state. So this was, I think, crazy. And the next slide is actually, yes. Oh, yes. His name was, I don't remember his first name. It was Benedetson. He was the second in command to General DeWitt, who was put in charge of all of the evacuation. He was a known racist, but not the smartest bulb, right? Benedetson, he was sly and very smart. And as a matter of fact, in the end, I'm going to jump ahead for a moment. Oh, I don't have to. There was a commission on wartime relocation and internment, and there were public hearings, and then it came out. It was pure racism. That's why the Supreme Court allowed this to happen, because they made an argument that was for national security. And then they started, 40 years later, finding documents in the National Archives that clearly showed this was racism and war hysteria and lack of political leadership. Anybody see a similarity between a lack of political leadership then and now? I mean, Earl Warren was the governor of California at this time, became a Supreme Court justice. In his memoir, he says, that's the only thing I regret. But why did he do it? It was an election year. FDR, it was an election year. Again, there's archives. It says up until the very last day before he signed the executive order, Eleanor was saying, you don't want to do this. But then one of his aides said, it's an election year, Franklin. Think about it.
The Attorney General, he heard him advocated for going in the direction of 9068.
Mm-hmm.
Going to walk through it. He was behind action for it for some period of time.
Right. But that's what he admitted to in his memoir, was his conscience said, this is outrageous. No, I don't want to do it. But because of lack of political leadership, lack of courage, he supported it. He came out and supported it, even though he knew it was wrong.
Julie, either you have to say what they said, or you have to pick a mic up there.
I see. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we'll do questions and answers afterwards. So there were hearings all up and down the West Coast, and as part of this commission, they wanted to hear from those people who were incarcerated. How did it affect them? How did it affect their life? And that's how the commission came to their findings, that it was racism, lack of political leadership, and wartime hysteria. And so Christina Mehta, for any of you who know her, the inimitable Christine, she was there in 81 in the audience at the courtroom with her little tape recorder. And she recorded the testimony of some of the people here. So I'm just for a minute going to play this man's testimony.
We were warned that the refusal to register was a violation of the Selective Service Act, a violation of the Espionage Act, and we would face 20 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, or both. But can you imagine the confusion and the turmoil? What to do? We had no recourse to counsel. I held out to the end and never registered, and was placed in the category of disloyals and detained at Tule Lake. But after 35 years, can you imagine my chagrin, my dismay, my frustration and my anger when I learned the truth of the registration? When I learned that the War Department had determined that the registration and the answering of the loyalty questionnaire by draft agency say were not compulsory.
Everybody hear that? Yeah. It was a little bit staticky. But yeah, he was just saying, he was just recounting what I was showing. in those chairman board meetings. And just something that strikes me was this was Hiroshi Kashiwagi, was the words he used. He was chagrined. He was dismayed, because he was held in a prison because he said no. I would use a lot of other 4-letter words. I would be a little more than chagrined, right? But you hear this and you really see the depth of how it affected them. He considered himself a criminal until he found out, whoa, I didn't have to do that. There wasn't supposed to be any penalty. Okay.
We were warned.
Whoops. Sorry about that. There we go. So as a result of the findings of the commission, the Supreme Court overturned it, the case, as a matter of fact. And as a result, they had to send, they being the government, a letter of apology and a check for $20,000. And I have worked, I get a lot of donations and I go into people's homes after somebody passes away. Twice I found the $20,000 check, or the kids' children did. It wasn't the money that was important. It was the letters of apology. But the $20,000 was also important because anybody can say, I'm sorry. Anybody can say that. But $20,000 behind that apology, that gave weight to it. So, but this is what they framed and put on the walls, the letter of apology. But I'm not going to read these whole things. Both of these letters of apology, George H.W. Bush was the president when the first checks and letters went out. And he says, a monetary sum and words alone cannot restore the lost years or erase painful memories, nor can they fully convey our nation's resolve to rectify injustice. And in enacting a law calling for restitution and offering a sincere apology, your fellow Americans have renewed their traditional commitment to the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice. That's a nice letter. That's a really nice letter. But the checks were continuing to go out. So it was still going out. Those checks were still going out during Bill Clinton's presidency. And of course, you still send a letter of apology. And what his letter said, I'm just going to read a couple things. Over 50 years ago, the United States government unjustly interned, evacuated, or relocated you and many other Japanese Americans. Today, on behalf of your fellow Americans, I offer a sincere apology to you for the actions that unfairly denied Japanese Americans the fundamental liberties. Anybody see a difference between those letters now? And again, this is about going behind the words. She said this was more personal. Even absolutely. Here, George Bush is saying, a law called for restitution. And the nation has to resolve the injustice. Clinton says, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We did you wrong. So I was looking at these two, comparing, seeing the different tone of them. And then I was watching a PBS show and I found out that George H.W. Bush fought in the Pacific Arena. He was a navigator in the plane and his plane was shot down. He was the only survivor. And he floated in the water for a day or two until a naval ship picked him up. Do you think he had some sympathy for these people? He had to write a letter of apology, but as a historian, I have a hypothesis that it just killed him to sign those letters. I don't know, but I think it was hard for him to do so. Bill Clinton hadn't even been born yet. Okay. So I could look at these side by side and say, oh, there's always a backstory. There's always a different point of view, and you have to take those into account. Okay. And California in 2020 did sign an actual bill, House Resolution 77, that said, we apologize. And it's a law. And February 2020, it was the last public event I attended before lockdown. And I was thinking, what an awful time. But that was the one little ray of sunshine. I got to see this. And that's Kiyo Sato and Christina Mehta and Lester Ochita, all survivors from the camps and just amazing people. So, how do we protect our civil rights? And this, I think, could be helpful for all of us right now, right? Legal challenges. I think the list of legal challenges going through the courts right now, I don't even know how many there are. I think it's well over 100. So these legal challenges, it took a while. The Coram Nobis from 1988, these three people, Gordon Hirabayashi, Minoru Yasui, and Fred Korematsu, they fought it. And they went to prison. They didn't go to the camps. They went to prison. And Matsui Endo, she worked for the government, and she was also fought it. And all the legal challenges eventually won. Some of them took 40 years, but justice delayed instead of justice denied. Allies. These were all of the allies from the No Kings marches. So all of these people coordinated, or these organizations coordinated, and you can see the wide variety. The ACLU, Amnesty International. One of them, I think, is the American Atheists. Strange bedfellows, but all fighting for the same thing, right? And activism. Suru for Solidarity. One of the founders is Satsuki Ina. And they've actually had success in closing down some detention centers. Busload of some elderly Japanese American women. They're not yelling. They're not carrying signs. They're standing there. And they'll stand there forever. Do not screw around with elderly Japanese American women, because they can outlast anybody. So activism does help. And leverage the advantages. And then this, I'm going to use some examples of some of my experiences. First off, social media. Our audience uses, the people we want to reach use social media. Anybody under the age of 30 now, that's where they're getting their information. If I press on the first one, expand beyond preaching to the choir. Okay. I think that's important. We can all sit here. We probably are in agreement. If not, that's great too. We all have our own opinions. But I'm telling you, we're all on the same page. Pete Buttigieg is famous for going on Fox News. As a matter of fact, he starts some of his talks by saying, oh, you may have seen me on Fox News. He is articulate. He's not contentious, but he's telling his point of view. So that's the thing, is get your message out, but to people who otherwise would not be getting that message. Okay, if we can go back to the next one, or back to the PowerPoint. Oh, I think this is where we are, right here. Yeah? Yeah. Have any of you heard of the word influencers? Yeah. Social media influencers. So I went through the list of liberal influencers: Obama, Kamala Harris, you know, famous left-leaning, high-profile people. The thing is, again, they're preaching to the choir. So if you can press on influencers, the link, yeah. Oh, okay. Otherwise, I had problems finding anything for left-leaning. Oop. Anyway, we can classic sales. Oops. And let's see. Let's see if I can get, I do not want to download that. Okay. We'll just move on. Okay. What they do, there's this one influencer where he's very right wing. He's definitely MAGA. He's young, but he doesn't tell people go out and protest, go out and, you know, join organizations. He gives his opinions, and he's influencing these young people. He has over 1 million viewers. So he's not on, you know, the soapbox saying do this, do that, do that. He's just saying, this is my opinion. Teacher institutes, Teach the Teacher. They have a much wider range. They've got their children, you know, their students of all ages. And of course, I'm in California. I can teach about this. If I was in Alabama, I could get sued by parents because their child may go home and be ashamed to be an American because of what they did. So Teachers Institutes, and there's one called Teaching Tough Topics, which I participated in. The other speaker was a friend of Anne Frank's, and she talked about, you know, the Holocaust in the Netherlands, and another speaker was talking about the Rwanda genocide. How do you teach young people tough topics? And I thought about this one too. Natural deterrence. I went to Minnesota to join the resistance after Alex Preddy was murdered. And once I got there, I kind of realized ICE doesn't have a chance. First off, it was 9 below zero. Yeah, those, you know, National Guard, they're from Texas. Welcome to 9 below zero. And just as an anecdote, a couple of Californians on the plane with me, when they got off the plane, they were wearing shorts and a sweatshirt. They found out what 9 below zero is real fast. And geography. The motto is Land of 1,000 Frozen Lakes. When it's January 31st, we had a lot of protests on lakes that were frozen over. Again, they would try to come on the ice and they'd end up on their butts. I'm from the Midwest, so I understand 9 below zero. I understand snow. I understand ice fishing. We all had to maneuver around ice fishing holes. So there are natural deterrents too. Anything you can do to leverage your advantage. And political representation. You know, senator, local, congressperson, state, especially down the ticket. It's your local representatives that have, I believe, the most impact, except for Mazie Hirono. She's fearless. I love her. And education. Anything, and usually it's online. And here you see George Takei's book, They Called Us Enemy. That's a graphic novel. I know of people who their one books in 5th grade was this book in very conservative cities. And that's it. I went a little over. I want to leave time for Q&A. So anybody have questions? I'll come to you. Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Excuse my reach.
This isn't a question, but in social activism, Fall of Freedom is a national organization that is going to be having an art show on May 9th at many galleries across the United States. In Sacramento, it will be at the I Street Gallery and maybe some other places too. I'm not sure of the other ones, but I Street Gallery will have it 8, 9, and 10. Fall of Freedom, and it's talking about the same thing.
Follow freedom.
No, Fall of Freedom.
Fall of freedom.
Yeah, Fall of Freedom and the problems that are going on. And this year, the focus is on immigration problem.
Cannot get more timely. And that's one other thing I noticed with Minnesota. Like I said, ICE never stood a chance. It didn't matter if you were what your political leaning was. It didn't matter what your immigration status was. After Alex Preddy was killed, that was it. And that's all I heard. Although it was Minnesota. So one of my favorite picnics, protest signs was ICE are mean poo-poo butts. I'm like, I'm stealing that. You're a mean poo-poo butt. But they did not give in. Thank you. Fall of Freedom. May 9th, 10th, and 11th. 8th and 10th. Thank you. Thank you. And I saw somebody else had a question. Oh, you got it. Thank you.
You just said they don't have a chance. They're just not in the press. Right? We're detaining just as many people, including some DACA students from here, from Sac State, I might mention, are also incarcerated. What do you think is going to happen later? We had, obviously it took years to get 20,000 isn't a lot of money. And if you were not a citizen, you got nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So what do you think is going to happen 40 years from now on what's happening now?
I can't say. Well, I never, ever, ever would have believed we would be in this place. It's so mind-boggling. It's so unfathomable. I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. You know? Right now, as a matter of fact, if you adopted a child and didn't make them a naturalized citizen, they get deported. They've only known the United States.
So in Hawaii, where there was a huge population of Japanese Americans, almost none of them got interned. So was it because they were a much larger part of the population and racism wasn't as prevalent as along the West Coast? Because it would seem the security argument falls apart where you would want to protect your outmost territories first from potential evasion.
Great question. Of course not. Of course not. They were very patriotic, whether they were Issei or Nisei. Anybody take a guess why there weren't incarceration in Hawaii? Economics. They needed the workers. Although if you look at it, the history of these migrant workers in Hawaii, they were already in camps. They were segregated already. The Japanese, it was a company town, but it was fenced in. Chinese had their own. Indians, those from East Indian, they were already to a degree in a camp. But it came down to money. Sugarcane and pineapple industry, they needed them. I'll be to you in a minute, but I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah. I've always heard that there were numerous young men in the camps who were eager to volunteer for the Army. Now, I don't know how much of that is propaganda, or how much of it is truthful. Could you comment on that?
Absolutely. And a lot did want to volunteer, and the government did not want them. Why do you think they changed their mind? They did use them in the Pacific theater as translators, but a lot wanted to go to the European theater and fight too. The reason why they suddenly started, because all of the others were getting killed. They were running out of troops. So suddenly, if you answered yes on that loyalty questionnaire, they'll let you go. And a lot of people, these young men wanted to join just to get out of camp. Some were patriotic. This is their country. But I know of a number of people who say that their brothers or fathers left because anything to get out of camp. They wanted more than 2 ounces of rice. Okay. And I'm sorry, you actually were next, this gentleman, but I'll be with you in a minute.
Currently in Texas, the restaurants are closing because of lack of labor.
I read that story this morning. Yeah, the lack of labor, agriculture, restaurant. And the owner came right, the people that they interviewed for that, they came out and they said they're not taking jobs away from Americans. This is back-breaking work that these undocumented migrants will do. Please give us an exception. Or they want work visas. Right now we got Steve Miller, but they want the work visas. Didn't think about it when they voted for him. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. You mentioned the leaders of the community being arrested right after Pearl Harbor by the FBI. However, it's my understanding that J. Edgar Hoover did not favor mass incarceration. Could you comment on that?
Actually, you summed it up. He did not favor it, but he was FBI. What Executive Order 9066 did is it didn't say evacuate people of Japanese descent. What it says is, I give the power for the military to make decisions. The military is now your government. Hoover, he was FBI. General DeWitt was making decisions about liberty, freedom, and constitutionality of that. And as I was saying earlier, he was a proven racist. I mean, it's all over his writings. And he was given that power. FDR never said Japanese Americans.
I have a quick. Oh, here.
I'll be with you in one moment.
Like a duck, not reflecting his actual opinion.
Of course. He just said sounds like a duck,
Yeah.
not reflecting his actual opinions. You see that a lot, my friend. And I'm sorry, okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's NorCal Resist is very active here in the Sacramento region. And for those of you that don't know, there are detentions taking place downtown at the federal building every week. I'm down there once a week. I've seen multiple detentions over the course of my time down there.
Yeah.
Woman on Wednesday was threatened with removal. She has a removal order. She's been in the United States for 32 years. She's from the Philippines. She's a matriarch of her family, like 10 kids and grandchildren, and they're threatening to deport her now back to the Philippines. And then there was a young woman that was detained and was scheduled to be put on a plane and sent to Mexico within 12 hours of her check-in at ICE.
And did everybody hear that? That right now in Sacramento at the federal building, they're detaining people. Bear in mind, though, that has to be resolved state by state now. So in the District of Columbia, Washington, ICE cannot go into federal buildings. They can't go into the courts. That has to be done by state. So California needs to go in and say, ICE can't, which we already have. We're a sanctuary state. But if you're not a sanctuary state or you don't put a law on the books, I mean, that's how it's, I don't want to say segregated, how disjointed everything is. And if you live in a state that's led by people who are very anti-immigrant, good luck getting those protections passed legally. We happen to be lucky. And I'm sorry, what was the name of that organization? NorCal Resist. So Amazing.
We have quite a few Renaissance members who were involved. Excuse me. Julie, this is wonderful. Because I'm Italian, I can't help but comment on the fact that during World War II, Storia Segreta, the secret story, came to light not all that many years ago, maybe 20. And there's been a really good exhibit, I don't know if you've had it here, about what happened to the Italian men all up and down the coast of California. They were all taken away, basically put in the same type of camps. And the women who had jobs downtown, worked at, the big department stores, etc., they had to be at home before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They confiscated radios, cameras, and of course, telephones. They didn't have our telephones then. But no, it was it's not as well known, obviously, and they weren't treated quite as badly as the Japanese, but it did happen. Yeah.
They were put into the Department of Justice camps. So not all of them, but if there was even a hint that they might be an enemy alien, they went to Department of Justice camps where they were governed by the Geneva Convention.
We could talk about all of this for a very long time. Julie, I so appreciate the fact that you're here.
Inviting me. Thank you.